The stream is live. So welcome to this Don Valley West Facebook Live presentation. I'm Rob Oliphant, Member of Parliament for Don Valley West, and I have got Sandy Borins, Professor Sandford Borins, with me to have a discussion about what is on everyone's mind right now, which is the issue of Canada-U.S. relations, particularly when it comes with respect to tariffs, which have been threatened by Donald Trump, as well as some other comments that Donald Trump has been making. Very realistically, I will also acknowledge we're on the eve of an election, and we expect that to be called shortly. And probably the biggest election issue that we're facing is how best to manage this potential crisis and this threat to Canadian sovereignty, as well as our threat to Canadian integrity in the way we handle what we believe to be the international rules-based order that we have come to be both dependent on and to be huge beneficiaries of. So we're into this place right now, and I would like to turn it over to Sandford Borins, who can also set a context.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of free trade agreements. We could go back all the way back to John A. Macdonald, but I won't. But I will start with Pierre Trudeau. Towards the end of his last term in office, Trudeau established a royal commission to take a fundamental look at the Canadian economy. It was called the Macdonald Commission, headed by one of his senior ministers. The commission studied for a number of years, and its major recommendation was to seek a free trade agreement with the United States. By that time, Brian Mulroney was prime minister. Mulroney thought about it for a while, and he decided, yes, that was something that was going to be a fundamental initiative of his government. And the Mulroney government negotiated a free trade agreement with the U.S., with the Reagan administration. The negotiations were finished in fall 1988. By that point, Mulroney had to seek a new mandate, and the 1988 election was all about free trade. The Liberals and the NDP opposed the government. Ultimately, the voters decided that they would go with Mulroney and take a gamble on free trade. And while I don't discuss my votes in general, I should say that in that instance, I voted for free trade. I voted for the Mulroney government. The free trade agreement was implemented at the beginning of 1989. Trade between Canada and the U.S. grew significantly over the following 3 or 4 years. The Mexicans decided it would be a good idea to have a free trade agreement with the U.S. as well. When Mexico started negotiating free trade with the U.S., Canada felt that we had to be part of this as well. And this led to NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was negotiated between the Clinton administration, the Chrétien government, and the Salinas government in Mexico. And NAFTA was signed in 1993 and implemented in 1994. And over the next 25 years, trade between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. grew dramatically in manufactured goods and resources, and the North American economy became integrated, and I think all 3 countries prospered. That takes us to 2016. In the 2016 election, Donald Trump claimed that NAFTA was the worst deal that the U.S. had ever negotiated. So after his election, he demanded that the 3 countries renegotiate NAFTA. Indeed, we did. There were some changes made, in particular to increase the level of North American content in manufacturing, particularly automobile manufacturing. And in addition, a 6-year sort of sunset clause was included. So Canada, the U.S., and Mexico in 2020 signed CUSMA, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement, which Donald Trump said was the best trade deal that was ever negotiated. And now we come into 2025, and it turns out that no, CUSMA was the worst trade deal that was ever negotiated. And the Trump administration is imposing tariffs that are fundamentally a violation of CUSMA. And indeed, they're violating other trade agreements with other countries, and that's where we find ourselves. So that's a bit by the way of background.
So there we are. And I think, first of all, I would say you were right. You were right in your vote in 1988. And I think John Turner was wrong. And I think Brian Mulroney was right. Because what we have seen in these last 30, 35, 40 years, 37 years, is a huge benefit to all three of our countries, eventually, not only Canada-U.S. in the first FTA, free trade agreement, but with the three parties engaging, we have seen a tremendous advantage. And right now, Canada has free trade agreements with about 15 countries. And we do this we have 15 FTAs, but with many countries, because some of them are multiple countries. We do that because the theory about tariffs is they actually inhibit economic activity. They create barriers for growth, and that they actually are negative on the economy, on everyone's economy. So we're into this new era where Donald Trump has said that in the last election, his favorite word is tariff. And almost all economists, as I see it, think that that's wrong. Think that tariffs are actually negative, and it's neither a liberal or a conservative or NDP idea or a Democrat or Republican idea, but that Donald Trump is actually going down the wrong path. And so let's just look at this path he's going on. Backing up, just for those of you who may not follow tariffs a lot, tariffs are really done for three reasons. Sometimes tariffs generate revenue for governments. It's like a tax that is generating revenue, like a sales tax, but it is coming from an imported good.
And it's a discriminatory tax.
It's a discriminatory
because it only taxes imports.
That's right.
As opposed to something like the HST, which is a broad tax that taxes all goods.
That's right. It's sort of like saying you've got two producers of tires in Canada. One of them has to pay a tax and the other one doesn't. It's discriminating against discriminatory against one company over the other, or against one source over another. The second reason is it's often said to protect domestic industries. And so if someone is dumping a cheap product into a country through unfair subsidies or unfair practices, then people put tariffs on them to attempt, or duties on them to attempt to level the playing field. And they can be appropriate at times if you've got a fledgling industry, or you've got one that is critically important for security or a regional economic growth. You can often say you do that for good reasons. The third reason would be for diplomatic reasons, to use that word loosely, but to make a point, to punish, to use a tariff to stop something else that has nothing to do with the economy. And what we are seeing with Mr. Trump is actually, he claims that there are two problems. One, that we have illegal fentanyl crossing the border from Canada to the United States, which is causing the deaths of Americans. And of course, we believe fentanyl is a problem, but we actually don't believe that it is the problem of Canada. It's less than 1% of fentanyl is actually coming from Canada into the United States, and it's a way to demonize Canadians. The second issue he's talking about is an open border where illegal migrants are crossing. And again, we say he's confusing the border with the southern border, and these are not real issues. So we have a problem here with tariffs, and some of the questions that have come in are about how to handle these things. And what we have seen, the first thing to do is dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs, essentially saying that if they charge tariffs on us and our goods, we'll have to charge tariffs on theirs, which we recognize will hurt everybody too. But we didn't start this game. So, Sandy, how do these retaliatory tariffs really work?
Well, they cause pain for American producers because they no longer have access to our market. One thing you can think of the the sort of provincial governments no longer selling American product in their liquor stores as a non-tariff barrier, right? It's sort of a tariff high enough to exclude American wine, beer, and whiskey from our stores. And so that's creating pain for the producers of those products. And it's targeted in the sense that in some instances, the producers are in states that matter a lot to the Trump administration, like Kentucky. So what we're trying to do through retaliatory tariffs is to create pain for producers in the U.S. And we hope that this pain will be noticed by voters and by the Trump administration.
That's right. And I think just for Canadians sometimes forget this, but we do about $2.5 billion of trade a day with the United States. We are their largest customer. They're our largest customer. And I recently had a meeting with a politician from Poland. They do about as much trade in a year with the United States as we do in a week. And so this is, we have two economies, Canada, the United States. They're integrated. One example of that is the automotive industry. We have steel and aluminum produced in Canada. Sometimes it gets shipped to the United States to make parts. The parts come back to Canada to go into chassis or frames, and the frames go back to the United States to add on certain other materials. It comes back to Canada to be assembled with parts which have come from the United States, components that when you look at your car, you realize it's made up of thousands and thousands of parts. And those, this has worked. It's worked so that we have two countries, two economies. Obviously, Canada is much smaller, but we have found a win-win situation. And
yeah, Canada produces a lot of cars that are sold in the U.S. and vice versa.
This is it, and it works. It works.
Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when there wasn't free trade in autos, and Canada produced cars for the Canadian market, things like the Pontiac Laurentian. Mm-hmm. And these cars weren't particularly great, but they were really expensive.
Yeah.
And what free trade did is give both countries access to the other's market, and automobile factories in both countries became more efficient. It's definitely win-win.
It's win-win. And I think, but at the foundation of that is actually the acknowledgement and the respect that we are a sovereign country and that we are an independent country. And it seems that Mr. Trump has decided that he has an ulterior motive, and he has talked about Canada as the 51st state. And I believe our new prime minister has been quite strong on this to say, you need to respect us, and then we'll talk about these issues. But the starting point is that Canada is a sovereign country with a shared past with the United States, as well as a shared destiny with the United States, but independent. And this seems to be not getting through to the White House. Is there a way we can get this through to the White House, do you think, moving a bit into politics away from economics?
Well, there are all sorts of economic things we can do in terms of economics. In addition to the counter tariffs, non-tariff barriers, reduced procurement of American product. The obvious one now is the F-35 fighters, and it's pretty clear that contract is on its last legs, and that will be a huge loss for the Americans. And there are consumer boycotts as well. So there are a lot of things that we're doing sort of with our economy broadly defined. Obviously, talking to other countries about expanding trade and expanding sort of military and military cooperation is an important thing to do. I think what we're trying to do is to change the political landscape in the U.S. so that when the midterm elections come in 2 years, the Trump administration will lose control of the House of Representatives, at least possibly the Senate, and then the powers of the president will start. The powers that Trump has seized or tried to seize will start to be rolled back.
So
people who are being political people at the political level who are being silent will start speaking up.
There has been a lot of silence. I noticed two things in this last few months. One, when I am shopping and I'm at Metro or Loblaws or Farm Boy or Summerhill Market, one of the places I shop, everyone's looking at labels. People are trying to buy Canadian. That will have some impact. Obviously, I know that producers and manufacturers are starting to up their advertising to indicate that they're Canadian goods. And I believe in buying Canadian. I also believe in flying Canadian. So if you're going to take a holiday this year, let's plan on Canadian destinations. I think this is good. We're also, as a government, since the first Trump administration, we've been trying to diversify our trade. So the previous Conservative government had begun negotiations on Canada-U.S. in a comprehensive economic trade agreement with Europe to say that we should be banding together with Europe. We negotiated the comprehensive progressive trade agreement in the Indo-Pacific on the Pacific side, the CPTPP. I've just been talking a lot about Africa, which has emerging markets as well as Latin America, but this takes some time. So we're going to have a little bit of disruption all of this, and buying Canadian will help. Sourcing Canadian and procuring Canadian will help. But my sense is that we're going to go through some rocky times, and businesses are going to need support, workers are going to need support, and we're going to have to do it. So it seems to me like as we are approaching this election, it's about saying, how do we gird our loins for one thing, but also make sure that we are protecting Canadian businesses, Canadian workers, and ensuring that Canadians are taken care of if there is disruption, while making the political case in the United States to say this is only hurting Americans. When they have to buy goods that have a tariff on them, it's not helping them. And if they have to sell goods that are now tariffed, they're going to lose market, and we're their biggest customers. So it would seem to me the only thing that Trump has in his mind is territorial aggression and wanting Canada to be part of the United States. And what I'm hearing from Canadians in Don Valley West is that's not on the table. We have a different linguistic reality with French and English. We have a different culture and a different set of values, while we're their best neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends in the U.S., and what I'm hearing from them is that's crazy. That the 51st state notion is crazy. And, a lot of people are saying in the U.S., we have great sympathy for Canada. Why is Trump picking on Canada? It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, it's one of those things that we're also very mindful that every day the goalposts seem to move. So we are trying to be nimble. We're trying to be flexible. Also trying to be very respectful of the American people and the American legislators to try to understand what's going on. It never helps to vilify someone who may be not understanding Canada. So we try to tell the Canadian story. We're very clear that we have both differences and we have similarities, and let's capitalize on our similarities, on our shared market values and our shared care of people, but also recognize our differences.
Yeah.
Right. I noticed a couple other questions have come in. One was that the current trade agreement is a contract, and as you said, we have a negotiated treaty, which when he signed it, Donald Trump said it was the greatest free trade agreement in the world. What are our legal possibilities, do you think, that we could challenge this, what he's doing right now?
Well, the place to challenge it would be with the World Trade Organization. and with the dispute resolution mechanism within CUSMA. Unfortunately, these things take a long time, right? And what Trump has done, he's basically ignored the treaty and just started imposing tariffs. And unfortunately, the president does have the authority to negotiate tariffs. I mean, there are certain, or to impose tariffs, and there are certain conditions, and he's claiming the conditions are due to national emergencies, which is where the hyped up fentanyl crisis comes from. Yes, we can challenge these in court, but it will take forever. We're playing in the court of public opinion, both
right
here and in the U.S.
So what we did during the first Trump administration was recognize that we had a lot of attention placed on the White House. And what we needed to do was diversify our public appeal and get to Congress, talk to congressmen and women, talk to senators, talk to governors, particularly on border states, and engage, as Prime Minister Trudeau at the time did, civil society. So business, industry leaders, unions, academics, and saying, do that third way of looking at all those relationships. I've been a little surprised at how quiet Congress is, and a little bit surprised how quiet most governors are. And any thoughts on that?
Well, the Republicans are being quiet because they're all afraid of angering Trump, and they're afraid of being primaried, as they say. I think the Democrats, to an extent, are sort of in a period of soul searching about what their party is and who they should be appealing to. So that in some senses is frustrating, but I am seeing more and more voices raised, within the U.S. Again, sort of civil society commentators and so on. And again, if Trump loses control of the House of Representatives, and remember their margin is only two seats out of 437, then the game will change dramatically.
Okay, we'll be watching for that. In the meantime, I noticed that 2 days after he was sworn in as Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney went to France and the UK.
That sends a message.
I think it does send a message that Canada has alternatives. Canada has strong diplomatic and economic ties with Europe. Those are two of the leading countries in Europe in terms of the economy, as well as Germany and others. I think that what I've been watching, and I watched our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly, who hosted the G7 foreign ministers about the same day that the cabinet was sworn in. And again, Germany stood up very hard and strong with respect to Canadian sovereignty. And what do you think we should be doing with respect to reaching up beyond the United States to our allies and friends?
Well, I think we're doing exactly the right thing in terms of that dialogue with Europe. Also, we should be doing that with countries in Asia. In a sense, Mark Carney's second trip should be to Japan. Obviously, he hasn't got time to do this before the election. And again, I'm old enough to remember when the first trip that any Canadian prime minister made was to Washington, and the first trip any U.S. president made was to Ottawa. So
things are shifting, and it's interesting. One of the questions that has come in is about Mark Carney, Prime Minister Carney, referring to Canada as the most European of non-European countries. And I think when we think about our Arctic neighbors and Nordic, we have a relationship with the Nordic countries and the Arctic countries. It's quite profound. I think that in our allyship with Europe around Ukraine, we have developed, I think they have respect for us now, and we have respect for them at the threat of Russia and Putin. on their sovereignty and their territorial integrity. So we're joining with them. But what about Canada opening up discussions with the EU about membership or associate membership, or maybe a relationship like Norway or Switzerland has with the EU, which is not as a member but as a close partner?
Again, great idea. I think sort of the thrust of our foreign policy has to be to look for alternatives to the U.S., to look beyond the U.S.
So
I think what Carney was saying is appropriate, because our values in many ways are closer to those of our European allies than of the U.S.
When we look at things like public health care,
diversity, language, guns, etc. So it's not a stretch to say that we are like Europeans in terms of our values.
I think it is quite clear, and I think one of the first things that Trump did as president was, declare the unilingual nature, the one official language of the United States as being English. And I would think that Quebecers would actually recognize this as a threat, that Canada has recognized that we are a dual linguistic country. We value the fact that we have two official languages, and that we work well together. We bump up against each other at times, but that is more European as well. Switzerland has three languages, and Belgium has two languages.
And again, in terms of values, what sort of message is Trump sending by taking all mention of Jackie Robinson off of the Department of the Defense Department's website?
There are things.
This is not the way we see our country.
There are things which I hope I understand later in life, but I'm still young, so I have years to go before I have to figure. But there are mysteries that I'm trying to get at that. One question that has come in is, why did Donald Trump say he'd rather deal with Canadian liberals than conservatives? And I found that kind of interesting. And I have learned that I can't take things perhaps that President Trump says at face value. There may be another agenda. One worries about that. I'm not sure I really care about whom he would sooner deal with. I know that I would sooner deal with sending Mark Carney to negotiate on behalf of Canada rather than Pierre Poilievre. But I'm biased. Any thoughts about that? What he might have been doing?
Oh, I sort of think of some of what he's doing as trash talk, sort of messing with our minds. And my guess is that during the election campaign, we'll see much more trash talk coming from Trump. And one day he'll attack one candidate, another day he'll attack another candidate. And what I think we have to do as Canadians is keep our eye on the ball, to think about what our interests are, and to ignore this show that will undoubtedly be going on.
It does feel like that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's unprecedented in the sense that it's this sort of standard of sort of diplomatic procedure that heads of state don't comment about the candidates in elections in other countries.
This is at the heart of political interference or election interference, for sure. We monitor elections in other countries. We may have individual or private opinions, but I did note that during the last presidential election in the United States, Prime Minister Trudeau was very careful to not talk about any choice that he would have for who should be the president of the United States. He may have had a personal opinion. I suspect we would know what that was, but he didn't say it. And so we're into a new era, particularly scary for me with Elon Musk being such a regular in the White House and having so much influence over social media. So it is a new era.
Definitely not a great era.
Right.
I guess what what is most bothersome is the attack on the rules-based international order.
And this is something that, I mean, we expect from, Vladimir Putin. We expect this from a country with an authoritarian ruler. But the Bretton Woods era, the whole way in which we have learned to respect each other's domestic laws while maintaining the rule of law and good order internationally is something that has made us rich. It is something that we have done well with. And so we're trying to get it in our heads that we might, we're facing someone who doesn't play by the rules. So it is a tough one.
And it's, of course, it's made other countries rich as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
China, the U.S., Europe, and so on.
This is something that prosperity is meant to be shared, and we need help for developing countries as well. There's a question coming in there for you, Sandy. Can you provide an idea of how tariffs versus free trade affect Canada versus the United States? Does free trade with Canada benefit the United States more or Canada more? I'm not sure we can quantify it, but
that's sort of something I don't think you can untangle. I'd say if anything, it benefits Canada more because Canada is the smaller market and it's given Canada access to a much larger market.
Sure, but the impact of that has to be, again, not that big in the United States because we're smaller. I mean, this is like the threat of Canada having an impact on the American economy. We're 1/10 the size. So it really, I think we're overstating our importance there. I mean, they need our critical minerals. They need aluminum and steel. They need lumber. They need agri-food, the grains that we produce, oil and gas and energy. I mean, obviously, when he was threatening a 25% tariff on everything, then reduced it to 10% on our oil and gas, our energy, he recognized they need our energy.
Yeah.
One of my problems with stressing the need of the United States for us is maybe that inspires him to take over Canada. And that worries me because we're going to have to stay strong and recognize that there are values that Canada holds and Canadians hold.
Yeah. How would I put it? Hopeful. Yes, it's important for us to stay strong. What we have to hope is that Americans more and more see the 51st state and the takeover Canada as nonsensical.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
As nonsensical and something to be condemned.
Well, I was very
as
proud.
Misguided, nonsensical.
Yeah. I was very proud to be Melanie Joly's parliamentary secretary when the other day at the G7, she said the question of Canada's sovereignty is non-debatable, full stop. Yeah. And she said, just let's stop it there and move on. And it is simply not on the table. So we will be resolute on that. And I think we work with the Americans. We bring our allies in. I mean, we are in important clubs in the world. We're in the G7. We're in the G20. We're part of La Francophonie. We're part of the Commonwealth, the OSCE, the OECD. These are our clubs that are significant. And so I think we'll need to be rallying those relationships at the same time.
Absolutely.
There's a question there about Africa, and South African is on the line. And this is really important. This is at the heart of what I've been doing the last 2 years. We have launched the Canadian strategy towards Africa, which is about partnership. And there are 4 significantly large economies in Africa. It's South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, and Morocco. There are also large emerging economies like Ghana and Kenya. We're an aging population. Just look at us there, Sandy, you and I, we're aging. And you look at Africans and they're young. They have an emerging middle class. We have to support that middle class. And these are both markets for our products, but also engagement with the young people of Africa who are talented and interesting. And I often say the cure for cancer may be locked in the mind of a young African who can't get to university. And so we need to value educational opportunities. We need to get our universities and colleges working in Africa, and we need more business deals. So this new partnership, which is based on a memorandum of understanding with the African Union, is about equals. It's about talking to each other. And so it's incredibly important. And if that caller wants to write me, do that. rob.oliphant@parl.gc.ca. Let's get something going. It used to be that Africa was far away. It's closer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the Trump administration is all about looking inward, right? Sort of a Fortress America, building a wall around the U.S., the fiction that, all strategically significant products can be produced entirely in the U.S.
Yeah.
And this inwardness and xenophobia is going to hurt them. And the best thing that we can do is to look outward.
Well, this is
to
it.
strengthen our alliances all over the world.
And I think what Canada has tried to show the United States is we're friends. Every single Canadian that I obviously have family and friends in the United States. I went to school in the United States. I lived in a border city in Sault Ste. Marie, where we had critical friendships and relationships that were across the border. We're not the enemy. We're the friend, and we want to reach out to Americans. And so my appeal to Canadians is let's be fiercely patriotic. Let's be proudly Canadian. But to be proudly Canadian means we never look inward. We always look outward and respect Americans. We respect their differences. We respect their ingenuity, their prosperity, their innovation. Let's work together and enjoy this, because we share this continent, and with Mexico, we share this continent, we share this hemisphere, and we should be working well together.
The challenge to us is to show that we respect Americans at the same time that their president is every day disrespecting us.
It is a challenge, and I mean, there's a question there about whether Mr. Trump would be allowed to attend the G7. That's not up to me. It's way above my pay grade. But I think what is typically Canadian is we talk, we engage, we don't shut out. Mr. Trump may be saying things that we find totally disrespectful, totally unhelpful, but Canada keeps the door open. That's what it means to be Canadian, and we will keep doing that.
Agreed. And whatever his criminal status, he's the head, the head of state. He will come to the G7 in Canada if he wants to.
That's it. And and I think it's very clear. There's one questioner that just came in and said the reality is that there's a lot of bluffing and fluffing that's going on. There's a lot of talk and blaming. And yet the real question may be that Trump wants to gain control of Canada. And he does that through economic hardship. And he does that through weakening us. And we have to be resolute. And I was invited to speak at an event, a Cuban event this week in Ottawa. I wasn't able to go. And I look at the hardship that the Cubans have faced under massive embargo for over 70 years. I think we can withstand. Canada has tremendous, we have staying power. We have a spine of steel. I really believe that. We have what we need in this country. We have good trading relationships with other countries, and we need to do that. We have a couple of minutes to wind up, and turning back to you, Sandy, any thoughts that have come into your head as we've had this discussion?
I think this has been a great discussion. We continue to think about why Trump is doing this 51st state thing, what his ulterior motives are, and so on. But at a certain point, it doesn't matter. We're doing what we have to do to build our country, to make it increasingly outward looking, to get the message across to Americans that we remain friends and we remain receptive to them. On the other hand, we will hit back economically.
Do everything in our power, absolutely, and
it's the U.S. is so Trump didn't win by a landslide, though we'd like to convince the world that he did. The U.S. is on a political knife edge, and things that we can do economically can tilt the balance of power against him. What we're seeing is sort of a rampage from a president who has the support of both houses of Congress. That may not last for very long.
And I think what we have in Canada is the divisions that have been political or economic or otherwise are actually disappearing, and there's a unity. I travel around Don Valley West, but not just Don Valley West, around the city and around the province and country. And I think Canadians are resolved. This is bringing us together. I mean, we may have differences. Alberta may see this differently than Quebec or Ontario. The Maritimes will have its issues, Atlantic Canada or BC. We break down interprovincial trade barriers. That will raise the GDP of Canada. And it's more than beer and wine. It is in liquor. It's making sure we have mobility of labor in this country. Recognize that, yes, it's often easier to go up and down across the border from Vancouver to Seattle or Windsor to Detroit, but we're going to have to go east-west more and more and outside the country. So I will pass on to Prime Minister Carney that quickly after the election, he needs to get to Japan, maybe South Korea. We need to talk to Australia, New Zealand. We need to talk to the Nordics and the Baltics. We need to stay resolute on our engagement on the international rules-based order. And that means making sure that we take on Mr. Putin, we take on Mr. Trump, we take on those who would ignore the rules that we've established. And we will see what this next election brings, but obviously there seems to be something going on in the electorate that is saying that they're looking for someone who is stable and intelligent and strong. And for my part, it's Mark Carney, and let's see what happens in the next several weeks.
Well, it's certainly an important and ambitious agenda.
Yes, and I think in every election, everyone says it's the most important election in a generation. I hear that regularly. I think this one may be the most important election in a generation or more. And so I encourage everyone online today to get involved in the election. Come out if you've got questions, send them to me, and we'll enjoy it. So thanks Sandy for being here, and maybe we'll check in again in a few weeks.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Good night.
Good night.